Was I wrong for what I did? Tell me if you would have done the same thing, because honestly, I still don't know if I handled it the right way. It all started when I was just trying to live a normal life, a quiet life after everything I'd been through. My name is Sarah, and for most of my adult life, I carried secrets not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I served, not in the typical sense that most people imagine when they hear the word veteran, but I was there, in the thick of it, doing my part. And my scars, well, they were a testament to that. They snaked across my left forearm, a patchwork of white and pink tissue, a constant, tangible reminder of a day I wished I could forget. I didn't hide them intentionally, but I didn't flaunt them either. They were just there. I'd moved to a new town, a quaint little place nestled by a lake, hoping for a fresh start. I'd gotten a job at the local library, a place where peace and quiet reigned supreme, a stark contrast to the cacophony of my past. It was perfect. I loved the smell of old books, the hushed whispers, the gentle rustle of pages turning. My apartment was small but cozy, overlooking a small park where children often played. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of normalcy, a semblance of the life I'd always dreamed of. But as we all know, peace is often fleeting, especially when you're carrying a past like mine. My routine was simple. Wake up, coffee, library, home, repeat. I kept to myself mostly, still wary of forming deep connections. Trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. But one afternoon, while restocking the new arrival shelf, a woman approached me. She was a whirlwind of designer clothes and loud laughter, her voice echoing a little too much in the hallowed halls of the library. Her name was Brenda, and she was, to put it mildly, a socialite. She was part of the local ladies who lunch crowd, a group that seemed to exist solely to gossip and flaunt their latest acquisitions. Brenda, with her perfectly coiffed blonde hair and impeccably manicured nails, eyed my scars. Not subtly, mind you, but with a brazen stare that made my skin crawl. "Oh my goodness, dear," she exclaimed, her voice dripping with a faux concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. "What on earth happened to your arm? It looks ghastly." I tried to brush it off with a polite smile. "Just an old accident, Brenda." I wasn't about to share my life story with a stranger who clearly had no concept of tact. But Brenda wasn't one to be deterred. She leaned in conspiratorially, her perfume assaulting my senses. "An accident, really? Because it looks like something out of a horror movie. You really should consider getting that covered up, darling. It's not very aesthetically pleasing." Her friends who had gathered around giggled. A couple of them nodded in agreement, their eyes lingering on my arm with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. I felt my face flush, a familiar heat rising in my chest. It wasn't the first time I'd encountered such reactions, but it still stung. I retreated, mumbling something about needing to help another patron, my heart pounding in my ears. The next few weeks were a relentless barrage of subtle and not-so-subtle jabs from Brenda and her clique. Whenever I was in their vicinity, I'd hear hushed whispers followed by peals of laughter. Once, I overheard Brenda telling her friends, "Poor Sarah, she tries to hide those dreadful scars, but they just scream for attention, don't they?" It was like being back in high school, but worse because these were grown women, supposedly mature and sophisticated. I tried to ignore it, to rise above it, but their relentless mockery chipped away at my resolve. The library, my sanctuary, began to feel like a cage. I started wearing long-sleeve shirts even in the summer heat, trying to conceal the very thing that Brenda had so rudely pointed out. I hated myself for giving in, for letting them get to me, but the constant scrutiny was exhausting. One Tuesday, the ladies decided to host a charity luncheon at the local community center, right next door to the library. Brenda, of course, was the self-proclaimed head organizer, and she made sure everyone knew it. She practically glowed with self-importance. I usually avoided such events, but my boss, Mrs. Gable, a sweet old woman with a heart of gold, insisted I make an appearance to represent the library. "It's good for community relations, dear," she'd said with a gentle smile. So reluctantly, I found myself in a room filled with chatter and the clinking of silverware, trying to blend into the wallpaper. I wore a long-sleeved blouse, hoping it would deter any unwanted attention. But Brenda, like a heat-seeking missile, found me. "Sarah." "There you are," she chirped, her voice cutting through the polite hum of conversation. She had a group of her friends with her, all perfectly made up and adorned with expensive jewelry. They all turned their attention to me, a collective smirk gracing their lips. Still hiding those unique features, I see. Brenda purred, gesturing vaguely towards my arm. Honestly, dear, you shouldn't be ashamed. Just get some nice cover-up makeup. Or perhaps a tattoo? A pretty flower to distract from the roughness. Her friends giggled on cue. One of them, a woman named Carol, chimed in. Yes, Sarah, you should consider something more delicate. Those scars are so masculine. That was it. Something inside me snapped. The years of suppressing my anger, of trying to forget the trauma, all coalesced into a burning rage. I felt the blood drain from my face and my hands clenched into fists. But before I could respond, before I could unleash the torrent of words I desperately wanted to say, a voice cut in. A deep, resonant voice that held an undeniable authority. Excuse me, the voice said. Is there a problem here? I turned and there he was. A man I hadn't noticed before standing by the entrance. He was tall with broad shoulders and a kind face framed by salt and pepper hair. His eyes, though, were what struck me the most. They held a depth, a weariness that I recognized instantly. He was wearing a simple jacket, but I could tell just by the way he carried himself that he was a man who had seen things. He looked directly at Brenda, his gaze unwavering. Are you harassing this woman? He asked, his voice calm but firm, a steel undertone that sent a shiver down my spine. Brenda, for once, seemed flustered. She stammered, No, of course not. We were just offering Sarah some friendly advice. She tried to smile, but it looked more like a grimace. The man, however, didn't buy it. He stepped closer, his eyes still fixed on Brenda, but his presence seemed to envelop me in a protective shield. Friendly advice? He repeated, a hint of sarcasm in his voice. It sounded more like bullying to me. Brenda scoffed, regaining some of her composure. And who are you exactly to interfere? This is a private conversation. The man didn't answer her directly. Instead, he turned his attention to me, and for the first time, our eyes met. He saw my scars, but there was no judgment, no disgust, only a quiet understanding. And then, his gaze shifted slightly lower on my arm, to a small, almost imperceptible tattoo nestled just above the cluster of scars. It was a simple design, a stylized trident, subtly incorporated into a larger, more abstract pattern that blended with the scar tissue. It was my unit tattoo, the one I'd gotten with my squad, a symbol of our bond, our shared sacrifice. It was usually hidden, but in my haste to cover the main scars, I'd forgotten to conceal it completely. The man's eyes widened, and a sudden stark change came over him. His posture stiffened, his eyes, usually so calm, now held a haunted, faraway look. He froze, completely still, as if time itself had stopped for him. He was looking at my tattoo, specifically at the trident, and a flicker of recognition, followed by a profound shock, crossed his face. He lifted his own arm slowly, almost reverently, and pushed up the sleeve of his jacket. There on his forearm was the exact same trident. My heart leaped into my throat. The man's eyes widened, and a sudden stark change came over him. His posture stiffened, his eyes, usually so calm, now held a haunted, faraway look. He froze, completely still, as if time itself had stopped for him. He was looking at my tattoo, specifically at the trident, and a flicker of recognition, followed by a profound shock, crossed his face. He lifted his own arm slowly, almost reverently, and pushed up the sleeve of his jacket. There on his forearm was the exact same trident. My heart leaped into my throat. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have revealed your past then and there, or would you have kept it a secret? The silence in the room became deafening. Brenda and her friends, who had been ready to unleash another round of mockery, now looked utterly bewildered. The man, the veteran, was still frozen, his eyes fixed on my tattoo, then back to his own. It was a moment suspended in time, a silent acknowledgement of a shared experience that transcended words. I could feel the weight of everyone's stares, the sudden shift in atmosphere. The veteran slowly lowered his arm, his eyes still holding that distant, painful recognition. He then looked at Brenda, and his expression was no longer calm. It was hard, etched with a raw anger that made her visibly flinch. You, he said, his voice a low growl that vibrated with suppressed fury. Have no idea who you're talking to, no idea what she's been through. Brenda, completely out of her depth, stammered, I don't understand. What are you talking about? The veteran ignored her. He turned to me, and his eyes, though still pained, now held a deep respect. He gave a subtle nod, a silent question passing between us. It was an invitation, a recognition of kinship. I knew what he was asking. He was asking if it was okay to speak, to reveal the truth. And in that moment, seeing the genuine understanding in his eyes, feeling the protective presence he exuded, I made my decision. My secrets, for so long a burden, now felt like something that needed to be shared. Not for my sake, but for the sake of setting Brenda straight. I returned his nod, a silent permission. He turned back to Brenda, his voice rising, carrying through the stunned silence of the luncheon. "This woman," he declared, gesturing towards me, "is not poor Sarah with ghastly scars. This woman is a hero. She served this country just like I did, and those scars you so cruelly mock? They're not from an accident. They're from an IED blast." The words hung in the air, heavy and shocking. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Brenda's face, usually so composed, went ashen. Her friends looked at each other, their smirks vanishing, replaced by expressions of horror and shame. "We were part of the same unit," the veteran continued, his voice thick with emotion. "The trident you see on her arm and on mine is the mark of a very specific, very dangerous operation. She was a medic, a damn good one. She saved lives. She saved my life." He looked directly at me then, a profound gratitude in his eyes. "I remember that day, Sarah. I remember the explosion. I remember you, covered in dust and blood, still trying to patch us up, even as shrapnel tore through your own arm." Suddenly, the floodgates opened. The words poured out of me. Years of suppressed trauma, of silent suffering, finally finding a voice. "It was in Afghanistan," I began, my voice trembling but growing stronger with each word. "A routine patrol or so we thought. An IED. It went off right next to our Humvee. Chaos. Dust, screams, the smell of burning metal. I was trying to get to the wounded, trying to stop the bleeding. The shrapnel, it just tore through my arm. I lifted my left arm, no longer caring about hiding the scars. These aren't ghastly. They're a reminder of what I survived. A reminder of the men and women I served alongside, some of whom didn't make it home. They're a reminder of the price of freedom." I looked directly at Brenda, my eyes blazing. "You sit here in your designer clothes, sipping champagne, and you mock a woman for her scars, for the very physical embodiment of her sacrifice. You call them masculine, unpleasant. Do you have any idea what it means to face death every single day? To watch your friends fall? To carry the weight of that experience for the rest of your life?" My voice cracked with emotion, but I pressed on. "I didn't ask for these scars, but I earned them, and I am damn proud of them." Brenda was speechless. Her jaw hung open, her perfectly made-up face contorted in a mixture of shock and utter mortification. Her friends, who had been so quick to laugh with her, now looked away, unable to meet my gaze. The entire room was silent, every eye fixed on me, then on the veteran, then back on Brenda. The air was thick with tension, with the sudden, brutal weight of truth. The veteran, whose name I later learned was Mark, stepped forward and placed a gentle, supportive hand on my shoulder. "Sarah here," he said, addressing the room, "is one of the bravest people I know. And for anyone to mock her for what she's endured, for her service, is an insult not just to her, but to every single person who has ever put their life on the line for this country." His voice resonated with a quiet power that silenced any lingering doubts. Mrs. Gable, my boss, who had been observing the entire scene with a look of growing concern, now stepped forward. Her sweet face was etched with a rare anger. "Brenda," she said, her voice surprisingly firm, "I think you owe Sarah a very profound apology, and perhaps a lesson in common decency." Brenda, finally finding her voice, stammered, I'm so sorry, Sarah, I had no idea. I truly didn't know." The words sounded hollow, forced, but the raw humiliation in her eyes was genuine. Her perfectly coiffed hair seemed to droop. Her designer dress suddenly looked out of place. Her friends were now practically cowering, avoiding all eye contact. The tables had turned dramatically and irrevocably. I didn't need her apology, not really. The damage had been done. But seeing her squirm, seeing her carefully constructed facade shatter, was a small victory. "No, you didn't know," I said, my voice calmer now but still laced with steel. "Because you never bothered to look beyond the surface. You never bothered to see a person, only a flaw." The luncheon effectively ended there. The cheerful atmosphere had been irrevocably shattered, replaced by an uncomfortable silence and furtive whispers. Brenda and her clique, thoroughly chastened, made a hasty exit, their usual confidence completely gone. As they left, I caught a glimpse of Brenda's face, and for the first time, I saw genuine shame in her eyes. It was a small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. After they were gone, Mark turned to me, a warm smile finally breaking through his weary expression. "It's good to see you, medic," he said, extending his hand, "though I wish it were under better circumstances." I took his hand, a sense of camaraderie washing over me that I hadn't felt in years. We talked for a long time that day, sharing stories, catching up on the years that had passed since that fateful day in Afghanistan. It was a release, a burden lifted to finally speak to someone who truly understood, someone who shared the same memories, the same scars, both visible and invisible. The incident spread like wildfire through the town. By the end of the week, everyone knew Brenda's story, and her reputation was in tatters. She was ostracized by the very people she sought to impress. Her ladies who lunch group quickly disbanded, no one wanting to be associated with her cruelty. As for me, the incident had an unexpected effect. Instead of retreating further, I found myself embraced by the community. People approached me not with pity but with respect and gratitude. They thanked me for my service, shared their own stories of loved ones in the military, and offered a genuine warmth that slowly, cautiously, I began to accept. My scars, once a source of shame and a target for mockery, now became a symbol of strength, a testament to my resilience. I stopped hiding them. I wore short sleeves again, feeling the sun on my skin, no longer afraid of the stares. And when people asked, I told them my story. Not with bitterness, but with a quiet pride. Mark and I became fast friends, sharing meals, reminiscing, and supporting each other. He helped me realize that my past wasn't something to hide, but a part of who I was, a part that deserved respect. So, was I wrong for what I did? For letting the truth come out so publicly, so dramatically? Perhaps, but in that moment, when Brenda and her friends laughed at my scars, they weren't just laughing at me. They were laughing at the sacrifice, at the service, at the very idea of courage and resilience, and that I realized was something I couldn't let stand. I finally found my voice, and I used it to defend not just myself, but every silent hero who carries the marks of their past. If you were on my side, please like this video. Subscribe for more stories like this and share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I'll see you all in the next story.